Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Neighborhood Go-To Guy. Today's video, I'm going to show you how to rebuild the fuel pump on a Troy Bilt chipper vac model 47287.
To get to the fuel pump, the first thing we're going to do is take the air filter housing off. These two bolts here, unthread them. Take off the housing and the air filter. And then we go a little bit further. There's going to be two nuts on two bolts here, and one bolt down here that needs taken off. And I already loosened those. Once you do that, just take the cover off. Now the vent tube, I pulled too hard, but you want to disconnect it here. That way you don't have to do it back further in. And then you'll get up here to the fuel pump, and then there's two bolts on either side that need taken out, which I already did. I'm rebuilding the fuel pump, but if you're uncertain whether it's the fuel pump, a few things you want to check beforehand is the fuel filter down here could be obstructed. Well, there's a third line in the back that vents into the fuel pump. You could take that off and make sure all the lines are clear before you rebuild the fuel pump.
Then a little further and got to the float bowl and took that off, and it was dry also. So that's telling me that the fuel is not pumping up into the carburetor. You can take the carburetor off if you loosen these bolts and take the carburetor off for a little more space, but I can get to these with a needle nose plier. Now there's three different lines. The top line goes to the vent tube, and make sure you mark that. The bottom back is the fuel line in, and the one in the front on the bottom goes to the carburetor. You want to make sure you remember where all those go. So what you'll do next is get these spring clamps off, and then use a flathead screwdriver to go ahead and push the fuel lines off. One thing I should mention is if these lines are stuck really bad, what I found that helps is spraying a little WD-40 right on the edges, and then just kind of twisting it back and forth. Get a little lubricant in there, it might help it slide off you. And once you do that, go ahead and take off the fuel pump. The next step is removing these three bolts. Remove the top, and be very careful where certain parts go. There's a gasket here that'll come off, a piece here that'll come off. It's kind of brittle and old. And then this is going to separate right in the middle, so be very careful. Probably the problem right here. You see the gasket is worn right here on the side. That's probably why it was not working properly. Now we're ready to reassemble. Go ahead and put this little spring on. I'm going to take the spring here, set it down in the middle. This little washer, set it down on top. And take our gasket. Set that down, and then put this cover back on. Put those two pieces together, flip it over, and we'll grab our other new gasket. Set that on there, and you can see there's a little indentation how that lines up. One side's nice and flush, and one has like a little curve to it. And grab our top, and I already put a new gasket in there. And then we'll flip this over, and then put our bolts back in. Now you want to take your time, make sure everything's lined up properly before you put the bolts back in. You don't want any air gaps. Once that's tightened down, we can reinstall the hoses. And remember, the top one is the vent tube, the front one here is to the carburetor, and the bottom one is the fuel line in. Once you have the lines attached, go ahead and put the two bolts back in. Next, reinstall your air filter housing. And remember, the vent tube, or the tube, has to come in through here. So you might have to play with that a little bit until it finally pops through. It has a grommet on there that'll sit nice. And once you get that in there, go ahead and put your two nuts back on and the bolt down here. Then reattach your air filter and housing. So the startup method for this is to put it in first gear while grabbing the baler. Setting the throttle to fast. Setting the choke, and then starting it. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you had fuel pump issues with your Troy Bilt chipper vac or anything that has a fuel pump, hopefully this video helped out. If you have any comments, do so below. Like if you'd like, subscribe if you'd like. See you next time from the Neighborhood Go-To Guy.